Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. My name is Ronald. This is my wife here, Vanessa.
Hello.
Well, typically people ask us some questions and they want to know us a bit more. You know, me, I grew up in Uganda. My wife here grew up in Canada here. I know you guys have been asking, wanting to know more about us. So, here we go. We're going to have about 3 questions. So this is going to be a series basically. So this is part 1 and then we can do part 2 and so on and so forth. So if you have any specific questions you want to throw our way, so put them in the comment section right below so that we can actually continue accordingly. Speaking of which, also my wife has a YouTube channel. Her YouTube channel is called Respect is Growing. She does amazing videos, you know, as a stay-home mom. You know, you have fun with your baby, with your kid at home, but also there's so many other things you're doing between laundry and feeding and you know, I don't know, all sorts of stuff, honestly, cleaning up. Exactly. So I'm typically on that side as well, so I really hope to see you there as well. Of course, as usual, give us that like, share, subscribe, of course a thumbs up, and typically I do cooking videos, so hey, of course, check those out.
And I always like to say, if you have any sort of requests for him, I always benefit from those. So go ahead and leave that below too, because I love eating his food.
Well, as you can see, all that amazing stuff right there. Yes, she's been loving it. And so is our baby Liam.
Oh yeah, no.
Alright, so question number 1. We wrote some of the piece of paper as you can see. So the first question is, where did you grow up? So as I've been saying all along, I grew up in Uganda, and that is East Africa to be specific, as you can see. So Uganda is part of the 3 East African countries, and it's called, and actually Uganda is said to be the Pearl of Africa. Just a little side note here, River Nile starts from Uganda. Those of you who know that, it's from,
I remember you telling me that.
it's from Bujagari Falls. That's where it begins from. Bujagari Falls. It's a name where it begins from.
Yeah.
But you also have a very big lake. It's shared by the 3 countries again. It's called Lake Victoria, and it's basically an amazing country if you ask me. Yeah, in general, that's where I grew up, and me growing up, things were a bit different, of course. I grew up because my mom, you know, passed away a little earlier, and my father passed away first, so I didn't actually get to see my father. Back then they didn't take pictures much, so that, and the little picture they showed me was a very little picture.
You said he was young, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I only saw like a picture of him maybe 2 years or 3 or something like that. So yeah, quite different. But my mom also passed away eventually as well. So it's you know, that's how I grew up personally. So I grew up, say, going from family to, from my aunties. I have a bunch of different aunties. So I had like about 4 of them. So one of them where I was, you know, I go to school there. In the holidays, I would go somewhere else to another auntie's place.
And just for reference, when he says school, he's talking about a boarding school.
Oh yes, right. I was in boarding school.
We're not sure what's more common wherever you're living, but for him, school means boarding school.
Exactly.
They would pay school fees for a semester, and they would live exactly in the same location.
Yeah, I would be at school, and I was on school compound for sure.
That's
so.
Right. Sort of like residence style, if you're more familiar with a Canadian or Western sense of things. You know, you'd have your room and then campus would be close, that type of thing.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, I went to a few schools. Those of you here in Uganda and you're watching this video, I went to Intinda Primary School. That is a primary school that I started off with, and here we say P1, P2, here they say grade 1, grade 2. So in Tindan I went to Chitante for a little bit, and for like S1, which is like high school, first class of high school, and after that I went
for senior, right?
Yes. And then after that I went to Mitiana Secondary School. I left before I finished my S4 or my
to come to Canada.
To Canada. So
Yep.
yeah. So in a nutshell, that's where I grew up, and that's how things have gone for me.
Yeah, and he's been in Canada since he was 18. I grew up in Canada, specifically Ontario, in a small town called Espanola. There's approximately, I don't know if the numbers changed, but it used to be about 5,500 people in this town. My parents still live there actually, and I have family who live there, so shout out to any Espanola people who might be watching. Being in a small town, I went to first Sacred Heart Elementary School and then the local high school. I had the option of going to Sudbury, which, if you're not sure where that is, it's about 45 minutes from Espanola just for high school, and I decided not to do that because, to be honest, I wasn't interested in traveling that much, and if you know Canada and you know winters, I didn't really want to be dealing with that. Plus, it was a really early morning because you'd have to be at the bus. I believe it was for 6:30 or some ungodly hour, and you may not know me, but I am not a morning person. I am much more of a morning person than I have ever been in my life, but that's probably more due to Ronald and his influence on me. So no, I just avoided that and I went to the local high school. But growing up in Espanola was really nice because we were able to be close. I have an older brother, so we were able to be close to family, both sides of my family actually. Most directly my dad's side, because he has been born and raised and he lived in Espanola his whole life. So I have aunts and uncles, cousins, etc. We still go there to visit, but obviously we've made different decisions and we live here in Southern Ontario.
All right, so question 2. Actually, our next question was supposed to be where did you go to school? We kind of have
we combined that
yeah, we combined
inadvertently.
Yeah, a little bit actually. So, but just to go a little bit further, so at the beginning of my school, I didn't really have shoes, so I was bare feet. I remember those kids you see in Africa who have no shoes. That's very rare, by the way.
And
FYI.
so you used to walk to school barefoot?
I used to, yeah, by foot and also bare feet. So that's two. But I know my auntie's where I grew up, actually she passed away, God bless her soul. And speaking of which, these are things I you kind of regret. I was actually back then planning on going back to see her when things happened, and then she passed away.
I did see her once on video, the auntie he's talking about.
Yeah.
But I think by then she was ill.
Yeah, apparently she was ill.
She wasn't.
No, she was. She was an amazing lady. Those of you who know the late Mrs. Nachibinge, she lived somewhere in Bokoto. But she did amazing towards my life, and I don't know however thank
Changed the whole direction of your life.
Absolutely. It is another backstory on that I won't get into, but I came from there.
She was very important to Ronald, as you can probably tell.
Oh yeah, she was really very important to me, honestly. She did, it's where I met other different people, in this case Sarah Sekalalas, and that's how eventually, again, that's a different story, different day, how I made it to Canada. But yeah, my thing was, I walked to school. I barely had shoes at one point, and also before I could even go to that place, to my aunties, before that I was in a different place, and I will tell you for a fact that these things are real, they're not made up. When you see people who don't have shoes, or people who have slept on grass, not a mattress, I know I've done that, slept in the same room with animals like goats, sheep, and so on and so forth, that has happened. These are real things. And also those houses you've seen made of tarmac, or the little huts you see,
sort of like shanties.
Yes,
I
something like that.
say.
I guess. Yeah. So
where they look like makeshift homes. As you can see, those pictures. That's what we're sort of talking about.
Exactly. So those things are very real, and I know me growing up, I didn't know anything about electricity was more like something you see when you go to in a little town, not something you have in the house.
Also, tell the story of you told me you used to watch TV through a window and it was the neighbors.
Yeah, not really a window, more like we through a window, but also they had a TV and all, so they're kind of had money. We call them rich people.
Yeah.
But we're through the window, so making sure we don't. In this case, before my mom passed away, she was very careful about that because I don't want to get too close. You might touch it, you might break it, and I can never be able to afford to pay for
replace it.
Probably should have to make money for the entire year to pay for a TV.
Yeah, because the money in Uganda is not, obviously, it's not dollars, it's shillings, Ugandan shillings.
Yeah.
And obviously Canadian money goes a lot further in Uganda. If we do send money to, he has some half siblings in Uganda, then we don't have to, really, when you think about Canadian standards, we don't have to send too much for them to be able to live long term there. And it's interesting how those things differ.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, currencies change in different places.
That's
right. It's honestly, I can go in more depth here, but it might take us longer here. But in a nutshell, that's my growing up, how things went around me and stuff like that. And
so, as I mentioned, I grew up with my parents and my brother in Espanola, along with extended family being close. That includes grandparents and, like I was mentioning before, aunts and uncles, cousins, all within driving distance to each other.
You hear driving.
Yeah.
Driving to each other, not walking around. Walking.
Although you can go for, and in theory I could have walked to an aunt's house or something, but I'll admit I didn't growing up.
How did you go to school? How did you get to school? I walked to school, and if I'm lucky, I had some money to, to be transported in the buses.
Yeah.
But how did...
I took a school bus from JK to grade 12. That was it. Or I was lucky. My mom at one point, if you're familiar with Espanola, you know this already, but I went to Espanola High School, and then maybe, if you're really slow, a 10-minute walk away, it was Sacred Heart Catholic grade school. And that's where my mom worked, and that's also the grade school that I attended. So
But she could take you to school. Your dad could take you to school.
Yeah, so often my dad worked shift work. Right. So he was not always available in the morning. He would pick us up sometimes, but not drop us off. But because my mom was going to work, she would sometimes drop us off at the high school. Or she would, if she was early, then we would walk over to the high school when we needed to be there. So it was really convenient. And then in terms of sort of like a socio-economic thing, we were more like middle class growing up. So obviously I've always had electricity.
You had shoes, I guess, and everything.
I never went without for anything.
Probably had enough pair of shoes.
I probably had excess of everything. If you think, you talk about only having one pair of shoes, and I probably had an excess number of shoes.
Yeah.
Although, to be honest, my parents still did and wanted to instill in both my brother and I, like being reasonable and not expecting too many things, because, moving forward in life, that's a really good lesson to have.
Also, speaking of shoes, so I remember one time actually we had these, so back in Uganda we have these sandals, as we call them. They are made out of tires, like old car tires. Okay. They've cut off. They are cut off that. Those are I remember back then, quite expensive too. So if you had something, it was amazing. But I made a mistake. That was way back before my mom passed away. So I remember I went to play soccer, I believe. I had them on. It's so cool. You have them on all that. And I put them on the side to kind of playing soccer. Guess what happens? A kid steals my shoes, so I go back without them. I went crying, and then guess what happened next? I got more beatings, because now I started walking around again without even sandals. You know what I mean? It's like, oh wow, because my mom of course worked so hard. So a little background here, my mom actually used to do hairstyling a bit. She did some hairstyling, but back then there's those little things they used to use and put them into the charcoal.
Isn't it a hot comb?
I think it's a hot comb, right? So
I think that's the term.
Then they do the perm and all that. So she used to do that. Also, she used to be a bit of a like say someone, hey, you want to come and dig for me here, whatever, and she could do that. So imagine my mother going through all that, and they didn't really live with my dad. But my dad knows.
No, but they weren't together.
Exactly, they weren't together, like two living together.
Yeah.
So imagine a man like that bought you something, and then
it's gone.
Then it's gone.
Yeah.
So our third question was supposed to be, how did you grow up, family dynamics, so on and so forth. I mean, we've already talked about stuff like that, honestly. But in general, in a nutshell, that's it. Like, it's growing up here, she had an easier life compared to where I grew up.
Especially if you compare to third world country versus first world country, right? And really, if we're being honest, like my parents, like I was saying, we were middle class growing up, and they worked very hard for their money. My father worked at the local paper mill. He's now retired. My mom was a special needs EA in the school setting. So not easy jobs.
Also, these are jobs though, but on the other hand, see, on this side, this is not easy. Mm-hmm. But on my side, still that is easier compared to what my mom just searching up a little. And also the fact that you grew up with two parents.
Yes, that's another one.
I did not grow up with two parents. I grew up with one, and then he passed away. She passes away, and I've never seen him. You had both parents.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
So do you see, like, these are real, differences we have in our lives. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. And also, I say for us at some point or so, most of the times we ate one meal because we couldn't afford having all that. Right.
And then meat wasn't a very common meal that you had.
Don't get me started with meat. Back then I actually ate meat, but the days where we had meat was those special days. You have like Christmas,
not just any day.
Thanksgiving, and you happen to have some meat or chicken or something. Oh, that is a happy day. It's like, yes, like you're so happy to. And I remember my mom, honestly, she never really held back. If she bought some meat or whatever, she made sure to give you some, to give you more. But also, as growing up, because remember, you don't have everything around you, so we could stealing is a real thing as a kid. So remember, after eating and everything, then you go, after your mom kind of goes away, and then you go kind of steal another piece of meat. But she knows how many pieces were there, and then she gets you later to give you some strokes like, why did you go? Yeah, I know, but that's what I mean by say these are things that you grew up around.
But it's also things that I wouldn't even have any concept of, because I had 3 meals a day, healthy meals too. Meat was a very common thing to eat in my family household.
What kind of snacks did you grow up with?
Like a lot of the tried and true Canadian things, or Western things, I guess you could say, like Fruit Loops and
I guess chips.
Chips, chocolate. Also, I'm trying to think of the name right now. Pizza Pockets.
Oh, wow.
We used to have those. I have memories of getting off the school bus after school, and keep in mind I have eaten at school.
Go pop in the microwave.
But I would go and have one before dinner, and so Pizza Pockets, cereals.
Well, there you have it. For me now, erase all that. That is inexistent, because first of all, that is what I call a luxury, because we could not afford it. So in this case, when you got home, most of the times you're ready, so they tell you, okay, go, you wash the dishes, maybe you're sweeping around or whatever, you're cleaning up whatever and this and that, and then after that you have the actual meal for the day. But in the morning, what we had as a snack or to go with is, like, say if we had made some, maybe the day before we have cooked some traditional food like cassava,
which are mandazi.
Those are, again, those things you have to buy, right? But I'm talking about the traditional things we could have. No, not everybody. We couldn't really afford to make the mandazi or whatever. Those, again, you have to buy the sugar and the flour and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But you have like things like, say, maybe sweet potato, maybe you had some maybe cassava, maybe yams, and those are things you have with a tea kind of thing, and then you move on. So it's completely different.
Yeah. and also just even think about family homes. So my parents, it's still the same actually home my parents in right now. It was a split level bungalow, so we had a basement with a rec room, gym area for my dad. There was a TV downstairs. That's where we often watched our TV shows and everything else. Of course, electricity, so therefore appliances. And then I always had my own room, same with my brother. And then as a family of 4, we shared one bathroom. Later on, in the basement, my parents eventually did add just like a half bath. But that was not, for most of my childhood, that wasn't there. That was more like teenage years that did that.
Okay. Yeah, see, those are like real differences, honestly. Because I mean, for me, me growing up, I know I had in different homes, especially different homes, but the home, as I said, my auntie, I gotta say, I was completely green coming from the real villages and so on and so forth. When I came to my aunties, the one who passed away, I got to see more things because they had electricity, of course, they had a fridge, they had a phone. And speaking of a phone, literally this is the first time I had seen the phone, and this is the most interesting, those phones you dial back, like
the rotary phones,
like when it goes back, those kind of phones. Oh my god, I that's the first one I ever seen. And I remember when I got there, and I had the phone ring, I'm like, what? I had something like, what is that? And then I see someone talking on something. What are they doing? Are they? So it was. I'm all green about it, and I was young because that's why. Again, that's after my mom had passed away, and somewhere I made to Kampala.
To be with
Yeah, because I came from Masaka,
which is a village.
Which is Masaka. I know there's a Masaka town, but yeah, there's Masaka. But also I came from further than that. I came from Meru. Someone who might know that. I came from Meru's like somewhere farther from there. So or I made it somehow in Kampala. Again, if you don't know Kampala, Kampala is the capital city of Uganda. And just like you see here, you have different cities here though. Then I know you have like say maybe Toronto. Toronto then is huge, right? But quite different for
very different. Some people might hear all this and say like, oh, how can you make that work? You know, she grew up this way, he grew up that way.
Yeah.
But I actually think we complement each other really nicely, because I know what you can have, and then obviously he's experienced what you wouldn't be able to afford or have. Even prime example, having one pair of shoes or having limited clothes, etc. Now we're able to look at that and say, okay, what's a happy medium? What can we do now for ourselves and also our child to show them the meaning of what's important and what you actually need to live? Because that's a funny thing. Like, that's a topic for a whole other video maybe.
Absolutely.
But
how
needs versus
work.
wants, that's a huge thing. And because we have different perspectives, we can kind of meet in the middle and say, okay, why don't we try this? And then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
I also compromise, like, so we talk about these things and see how best to go about things. For instance, I grew up not really eating out. But yes, you grew up knowing about the eating out part. But so we somewhere we meet in the middle.
It was a regular occurrence in my home. Actually, it was an automatic on Friday evenings after the work week for my parents and the school week for us. If my dad was available, like I mentioned, he's shift work, so maybe he was at work. But it would still be the 3 of us, so my mom and my brother and I would go out for dinner, or it'd be the 4 of us, my dad would be with us. So that was a regular weekly thing that we always did, and it was something that my parents budgeted for, so they made allowance for that in the week so that we could go ahead and do that. But again, if you go from someone who never did it to someone who really on a regular basis eat out often.
Now here I joined this amazing family. Karen, Matthew, I mean, it's the main family
Those are my parents.
Through which I knew everyone else, extended families within. I gotta say, first of all, they have bad manners. They are spoiling me so much. It's not right at all. They should be held against, doing things like that to people, I'm just saying. But anyways, honestly, they're amazing people, and I've heard from different people how they talk about their in-laws, and I have to say, Karen, Matthew, you guys are amazing. You've been nothing but amazing to me. You are not the typical in-laws I've heard of. And I remember the first time I had to meet your dad, or your parents are kind of like,
nervous.
I was kind of nervous about it, but they made it so easy, so
yeah.
amazing. But it is honestly here's
from
the
the beginning he was accepted in our family because obviously I cared about him, so they cared about him, and they saw that he treated me well and everything else, and so like I said, from the very beginning he was accepted.
Okay, how we met and history of dating and so on and so forth. If you want to know all about that's completely separate because it's also interesting.
That's another story. It's a very interesting story. But yeah,
so we won't talk about that right now, Ines. But honestly, we can go on and on and on and on. We have so much to share, but we're going to stop there for today. So yeah, in a nutshell, honestly, that's it. So I really hope to see you. Of course, with other videos as well, so check those out. As you can see, I've already linked a bunch right now, and that also at the end of this video there's plenty of those. So I have a lot of videos honestly up there because I put up videos every single week, for sure. Sometimes on Tuesdays, also definitely on Saturdays, every single Saturday. So check those out. I hope to see my next video. Bye for now, but leave the comments right below, okay? Or any other questions for that matter, for everything else you want to see. And by the way, for the word of the day today, I always do a word of the day here. Those of you who are new here, the word of the day today is growing up. You know, as you grow up in different circumstances or whatever, the word growing up is kukula. To grow is kukula.
Kukula.
So kukula is grow. Say. So, but again, remember, grow can relate to anything, really.
That's right, yeah.
But to grow is kukula. So, growing up, yes, kukula is to grow.